right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 423. We got a very special guest. David Roche is joining us on the show today for another episode of Ask Coach Roche, our favorite ongoing episodic series that we do with Ginger Runner Live. So if you've got a question for Coach Roche, today is the day that you get to ask him. We'll probably theme today's conversation around off-season training, and because we're kind of approaching the winter months, how can we stay motivated? How can we look forward to the spring training, spring races, summer, all that good stuff? How can we get through these harder months? And there's no better person to have on the show than David Roche. So sit back, relax, everyone. Ginger Runner Live, episode 423 begins now. Ginger Runner. Yay! What's up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 423. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Thursdays to spend a little bit of it with us. Today's a Thursday.
It is a Thursday, which means it's a very special show if it's a Thursday.
We would do anything for our guest today.
Anything.
And if our guest, if we were like, hey, would you like to be on the show? Our guest goes, yes, but it has to be at 3 a.m.
on Christmas morning.
Christmas morning, we'd be like,
okay,
Santa be damned. We would do anything for our guest.
Santa be damned.
Santa be damned. Unless our guest is Santa. In which case,
he'd probably be damned anyways.
Go give gifts. Yeah, he'd probably be damned anyways. David Roche is joining us on the show. We'll introduce him here in just a second. Today is an episode of Ask Coach Roche, our ongoing series where we get to answer your questions about running. Let's be honest.
Life.
Or life. Yeah, there's so much more than just running questions that we answer. I think we're going to kind of theme today's conversation, as I mentioned in the pre-show, around off-season training, or at least staying motivated during these times. I'm finding myself looking outside. It's been crazy weather, whether it's snow, rain, cloudy, it gets dark earlier, and just needing that extra sort of push. Our guest has been our coach for quite some time. Our coach has been our guest today for about 5 minutes.
Some time.
And he's just been fantastic about helping us find those moments of motivation when we need them. So if you have questions for David, that is what you are here for. Hello, Kim.
That is what I am here for. Hi, everyone. Kim Shima Newberry here, as always. And as Ethan mentioned, yes.
You're here for much more than that.
No, I'm as always.
As always, you're here for so much more than just getting questions. I didn't mean to pigeonhole.
Just hanging out in my plaid flannel. That's all I do here. Anyways, if you have questions for our wonderful guest, David, you can ask them in the chat. I have pulled some questions from our Discord.
We do have a bunch already.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But just ask in the live chat now, not on Discord.
Yeah, we've got the live chat going. Kim's in there as well. So in real time, ask those questions as need be. Speaking of GR Crew, we are live for Ginger Runner Live every week, so whether that's Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, with the GR Crew. If you would like to join the GR Crew and watch these episodes live, be a part of the conversation, ask those questions, you can join us over at patreon.com/thegingerrunner. All tiers get access to these live shows. They do go public 24 hours later, so everyone on the internet can enjoy them. We just love to give some perks to our wonderful supporters on Patreon, and there's so many additional perks from daily live streams. We do a daily show called Daily Brew, which gets crazy. Do you want to show? If you want to have any idea what the hell that is, join us on Daily Brew.
There's actually two of these.
There's actually two of them. Daily Brew, at some point, we'll explain what those are. Just some of the hard-hitting stuff we cover on those daily streams. So consider joining and supporting us and all that good stuff. One individual in particular at the top tier we like to shout out, Mr. Brian Sands. He's a wonderful, supportive human being. He supports so many different trail running organizations and creators, and he does so much for the sport just in his ability to support and inspire others. So thank you very, very much, Brian. We appreciate you and all that you do for the sport. Without further ado, I would like to present to you our wonderful guest.
Presenting him.
I don't know. Why so official? It's stupid. Our guest
it's the holidays.
He deserves more than just
you want to present him?
I would like to present our guest. Wrap him in paper.
The gift that keeps on giving.
David Roche.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. You know what I was looking at before I came on? You guys have 187,000 YouTube subscribers nowadays. Is that true?
It's true.
Nowadays, yes.
Nowadays.
Yeah. Heck yes, that is amazing. I just wanted to give you guys a big congrats before Christmas. That is wild. It feels like it was 100K just like a minute ago. So hell yeah, you're growing. It's amazing.
We're almost at 200,000. The YouTube subscriber model, I think they've been purging a lot of like bot accounts and stuff. So
Yeah.
the last like 3 months, it's gone like 185,000, 185,500, 186.1 thousand. I'm like, let's get to 200,000. I want to do something big to
Because something
celebrate.
crazy is going to happen at 200K.
David's going to come into the studio. We're going to fly him out here.
He's going to use these.
He is going to become the...
That looks so weird.
That does look weird.
hanging on to it.
They're candles, David. They're candles.
Okay. I was a little worried.
We'll do something special for 200 and you will have to be a part of it.
I was just saying, you were saying me as a present. I was like, I remember some like 90s movies. I think there were like, they put like whipped cream over their bodies, you know? And that could be, I would do full frontal for you guys. Like if it, granted, you guys might lose some subscribers, but you might gain some too. Maybe a lot of bots, but
There's always the give and take. And in that
you heard it
case,
here first. Full frontal.
David Roche is going to do the Varsity Blues scene.
I also like
Yes,
the
that's
reference
it.
because
How would I not know that? Of course I would know that.
You're a male of a certain age. You definitely
I
know
grew up in
that
the 90s and I
reference.
watched that scene on repeat for 6 months. I'm sorry.
Oh.
That's how we met. Is that not how we met? We were a part of a fan page.
Before I just think it's funny that we have been on the line with David for about 10 minutes here. And that is like the second
patience.
90s movie reference that has been made.
It's true.
My brain is just going for it right now. Yeah, we were talking before about Kim was saying, "Brr, it's cold in here," and then I immediately followed up with, "There must be some toros in the atmosphere." So I'm
That's
pretty
a Bring
sure.
It On reference for anyone
Yeah.
who is too young or just had different taste in movies in the 90s.
I mean, David, I actually was like, I think David's too young to remember the 90s. You're a young
Oh,
lad,
no.
but I now realize maybe you were born in the 90s or you lived in the 90s.
I was in the 80s. I mean, I got, I know I have this radiant glow to me, but I'm old inside. My cells, my telomeres are rotting as we speak. Actually, I'm kind of shocked by that. So like on our podcast, for example, we get this data on how old people are that listen. And even though we have a ton of listeners, so many, over 50% are between 28 and 34. Which is just wild. Like I feel like so often there's like certain cohorts that get into certain types of content online. And so obviously, it accommodates everyone. Like, we have podcast listeners that are 80 and podcast listeners that are in high school, which I don't understand what their parents are doing. But like, it's just wild how much the bell curve centers around there. And I think every single one of them will appreciate a good Bring It On reference.
Their parents are raising them right.
I mean, my nephew was heavily into like very smart scientific podcasts when he was like 8, 9, 10. And now
I think he came down on a trip.
Just turned 13 yesterday, and he's a very smart kid. And I was asking him like, what were you excited about for your birthday? He's like, I got a book about watches.
A book about watches.
And I was like,
wow,
like adult
pretty
stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah, the podcast names that he would drop when he was down on a trip when he was like 8 years old was like these deep dive podcasts that are expert level, like tax accounting podcasts about this thing and spirituality podcasts about this thing. Those aren't accurate, but they were like
climate change. Yeah, and like a lot of that.
Damn, kids these days, huh?
Kids these days.
Yes, there are only hope. Because I know my generation.
Yeah,
my
they should be
generation's
shoving
the
their
ball.
mind with like Bring It On. That's all they should really be watching.
Yeah,
and Bring It On again.
Do you remember?
I'm going down a rabbit hole.
Not another teen movie.
Of course.
Okay, that's basically all my references are actually going back to the parody of the movies. I'm thinking because like when I said the whipped cream scene, I was actually thinking of the whipped cream scene of the guy, which was Chris Evans, who becomes Captain America. From Not Another Teen Movie. So that's the big recommendation from this podcast. And we're going to get into all these great running stuff later, but watch Not Another Teen Movie. I'm sure it's even better than I remember it from when I was in high school.
Did you know that Not Another Teen Movie was Chris Evans's audition tape for Captain America?
Wait, are you serious?
Of course not.
Okay.
But can you imagine if he's like, hey, I don't really want to audition. I just want you to watch this scene. And the casting directors were like, sold. Okay. Nothing says America like you covered in whipped cream. It's between David and Chris Evans. I'll go with Chris Evans on this one.
Yeah. I am looking for a different demographic than him. I'm just like
28 to 34.
Yeah, that's how, yeah, exactly. That's how I've decided to make everything creatively is like, I am not trying to appeal to many people. I'm just trying to appeal to a few people a lot. So hopefully some of those are listening today.
Speaking of listening, hi everyone, welcome to the show. This is a perfect example of how we can get carried away on tangents with our incredible guest. We love him so much. We love the conversations that they have on their podcast. He and his wonderful Megan, partner.
His wonderful Megan.
His wonderful Megan partner Megan. But we're going to get into it today because I do want to talk about motivation and sort of like how we can get through these months. So you've been a coach for a number of years. You coach so many different athletes of different abilities and stuff. Is this a common thing that happens amongst all tiers of your athletes? Is there a trend in motivation waning during holiday months when things and stress and family and stuff get in the way, and weather changes and mood changes and then motivation changes?
Yeah, I think for every coach out there, this time of year is a effing nightmare. Uh, and that being said, like it's part of the human experience, and you get to see it in the zoomed out way where there is this major seasonal pattern. And I don't really think even it has to do with races so much. Even my athletes that are training for races over winter describe motivation lulls, mental health lulls, whether it's seasonal affective disorder or something else. Like it is a major problem. And I mean, my thing as a coach is like, I don't try to disregard that problem, but I also don't try to indulge it and just say, hey, that's fine. You can just like curl up into a ball and turtle through these months, because it's like you got these months and it's all we have is where we are right now. And so it's always like, okay, what can we do to, reorient our approach toward a more playful mindset with athletics? Because like, obviously I can't make there be more sun or the weather to be better, but I do think that athletics and other things in life, there's always an excuse for play in those. And so I view my role in summer a lot of the times as being like, okay, I want to design the perfect plan for a race. And right now I'm like, I want to design the perfect plan to get this playful so that the winter can be just as joyous as like June.
Yeah. I know from experience that occasionally I'll get the loving nudge of like, hey, let's update the log, or hey, let's, focus on consistency, or those are the things I need to stay motivated, because it's very easy to kind of fall into your old habits, or kind of embrace that I don't really want to run today. I'm going to kind of embrace the I'm going to chill out. I'm going to lay on the couch or whatever. So those little loving nudges, if someone doesn't have a coach, or if someone is struggling to find a source of that, is there a way that we can get those nudges to get out the door, to get the shoes on? Are there little things that we can do?
Yeah, well, I think it's all about setting up frameworks to encourage play. Like that's the reason I'm focusing on that word so much, is it's so easy for athletics, especially this time of year, to become any other box check responsibility. No different than completing a spreadsheet at work or whatever, where you're like, this is what I do because this is what I do. And that is a nightmare. And the negative mental health ramifications of that can be really huge, especially because the payoff of a successful run this time of year can sometimes be pretty low. Like you're not going to get these huge runner's highs necessarily sometimes when you're slogging through 3 inches of snow or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's why the event itself, the activity itself, needs to be the rewarding part. And with that in mind, that's why, like, obviously we're very serious coaches that coach a lot of pros, but we focus so much on things like running with fun music, airplane arms, like mixing it up, doing things that make you leave the little ball we can all get in within our own brains, especially in winter where that might not be quite as obviously transcendent as it could be at other times of the year. So what that looks like for every person varies. I know personally, is kind of thematic here. I've been listening to a lot of 90s and 2000s pop music recently on my runs. I've been really I even listened to a country music playlist the other day, which yeah. I don't recommend as those velociraptors. But you know what? It hit the spot, and I don't know if I was running on self-disgust or what, but I felt good that day.
What spot did it hit, David?
Like the shame spot?
The same spot?
See, this is the problem. So I grew up in the country. Like I grew up in the songs they sing about. Like it was 30 miles to my high school. Like high school football was everything. And you know what? Every time that the mandolin starts, the little hints of it in the background, I just find my foot just starting to tap, and I'm like, oh no, what am I doing here? My foot's just tapping. And sure enough, when I'm running, that helps. But country music being a great example of something where, like, I don't listen to that normally, but the similar approach is such a good way to think about running or athletics in general.
Yeah.
What are ways to leave the routine where it's not a box check anymore and it's something different? And whatever those things are can be a great way to structure the process, which is going to be so key for how fitness develops in 2023.
I truly appreciate that. And I mean, just speaking on country music for a moment here, I did have country music sneak into my like auto-populated playlist based off of listening habits. And I didn't change it because honestly, it was,
it just auto pop. It was just there.
It was just there.
Okay.
Luke Bryan fan page.
Yeah, I didn't. It wasn't based off of my web surfing habits or anything like that. I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it for the reason that you just described, which was this is different. I don't normally listen to this, but something about it is like, okay, I'm into the different thing right now. And I kind of felt a different feeling to music than I normally feel, right? And it felt new and fresh. So I guess I'm getting behind you here in that sense of like, I support that phrasing because I think it was an enlightening experience for me. Changed it.
I want to affirm you because I also think your tractor is sexy, Ethan. I really do.
Well, I could make, of course, this as someone who makes music, I can make the stereotypes of like every country music song says this, beer, dock, tractor, whatever, but that's not true. I know that's not true.
Have you ever seen the Bo Burnham country music parody?
Yeah.
It's
brilliant.
Just about I don't want to quote it, but it's very good. That being said, for those that are like, obviously country music contains multitudes. We're talking about pop country, and all pop music is pop music for a reason. But that being said, Working On by Colt Ford, I listened to it on a run one time and I identified so much with him he's essentially talking about country therapy.
Yeah.
So that's my recommendation for everyone. Working On by Colt Ford. Listen to it only when you're past 30 minutes of a run, because any other time you might it might lead down dark paths, but at that point it is a transcendent, life-changing experience.
Brilliant. You heard it here. That's the recommendation. We are cruising and talking about so many different things with David, talking about staying motivated and stuff like that through the winter months. But of course, this is an Ask Coach Roche episode. Kim has been so patient. You have so many questions pulled aside from Discord or the live chat. What do we got?
Yeah, and just a reminder, if you still have questions, you can still sneak them in as well. And this question, you may have kind of already answered this, but maybe you have something a little different to say to this particular person. So this question comes from Slow Man Running from our Discord server. Slow Man Running asks, I've been injured for most of the year, foot injury, and while I'm nearly back, about 90%, and I'm keeping fit in other ways, I just don't feel like running. How do I get my running mojo back?
Well, I think the first step always with running is unique, and it's actually fascinating. So on our podcast this week, we had Alex Honnold, and famous climber.
I'm clapping you because that's like, well done. Amazing. Amazing guest and amazing show.
We talked about Chris Evans junk the whole time. But the interesting part was at the end, he actually came with questions, like probably the types of questions that a lot of people have. And he was essentially trying to look at how can I maintain or build my fitness as a runner, which he wants to do an ultra every year, even as it's not his focus, while doing it as little as possible. And what we essentially talked about, he was like, 2 1-hour runs a week. It's like, actually what would be much better is a 10 or 15 minute run as often as you can. So like 4 or 5 days a week. And for this athlete that might not want to get back into running and also needs to rebuild their mechanical system from the ground up, that's where to start. You don't need to run a ton. You can go out for 10 minutes and it can be essentially just above your walking pace. Wait until the physical and emotional fire comes back, but that will lay the groundwork for adaptation later. And it's what's so strange about running relative to other sports. Almost nothing else works like this. With a cyclist, you could bike once a week, make that really quality, and develop as a cyclist. As a runner, you do that, you're not going to develop and you're going to get injured. And so this is pretty magical about this particular sport. It can also be kind of daunting because the only way to progress is to stack up so many bricks. And the size of the bricks is almost less important than the idea that there exist at all. So what I would say is keep doing what you're doing to build your fitness overall that you enjoy. I assume that's like cross training, biking, strength training, whatever. But start to incorporate just those 10-minute runs 4 or 5 times a week. Wait till you start to feel better about it. And then naturally those are going to extend a little bit and then go from there. But don't make your decisions about running from a place of being detrained and having it be miserable, because that's where it can be really rough. And so, to conclude about the Alex thing, what we talked to Alex about is like, obviously he's incredibly talented, but even with all of that, running, as he described it, can be heinous. That was his word. And the idea is, yes, running, if you don't run much often, if your frequency is low, can be heinous, even for the best athlete that's ever lived, possibly. It's an arguable thing for Alex. So for all of us, for like the rest of us, even more important to stack those bricks. And that's what Winter's about, stacking up some of those bricks.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say consistency is far better than volume at this stage, right? So
like it's not the size of the bricks.
It's not the size of the
that
bricks.
You are
It's
having,
the number of them.
Yeah.
It's
They
the
can be
motion in the
tiny
wall.
little. It's the Legos.
It's the motion in the wall.
Motion in the wall.
The brick.
We're freaky here. We don't.
Is that the haunted house? No, I totally get it. And I think anytime, speaking from my experience and trying to relate that to this, you reward me for consistency versus, hey, I did my big workout this day and I skipped this next day or whatever. You're more like, hey, I don't care if you hit this max 20-mile run on a Saturday and a 18-mile run on Sunday. You're like, I'd rather see you get the consistency versus the quantity.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing is it's not just like the obvious answer here is that it's all mechanical, right? Like our bodies are under load, that load needs to be constantly reinforced. But that's not necessarily the coolest part of the answer to me. I think it's part of it, but I think the cooler part is how the aerobic system adapts in this manner with running in particular. There are some theories out there that it might even be tied toward epigenetic changes over time, that running is extremely good at turning on. So essentially changing how your genetic code actually operates, and running specifically being how our genetic codes are designed, or the activity our genetic codes are designed to adapt to. So once we do it consistently, it can change us from the ground up, even if we're not doing it that much. So I think sometimes what we perceive as volume responding in training theory generally is frequency responding. And a good example being the athletes that do 100 miles a week at the top level of Olympic track, for example, are almost always doing 10 to 12 runs per week, let's say, with doubles, right?
Right.
Are we seeing that they're responding to 100 miles per week, or that they're actually responding to the frequency of aerobic stimuli? Those don't just have to be runs. They can be cross training too. Like, we have a lot of theories about that, but basically it just points out consistency is key. Like, I don't care how much time you're able to devote, but every single person can find that little bit of time out there. And if they say they can't, they might just not like prioritize it enough or appreciate it enough or like want to do it enough for it to be the thing that you should do, because there's no obligation to do any of this. So as a coach, that's why I'm just always rewarding consistency, not just because it creates the habit and that sort of thing, but also because that's what lets us have the fitness to then do the epic crap later. What we think we're seeing is the specific workouts that you might do in April, or the 20-mile run. And what we're actually seeing is the 20 or 30-minute run you do on a cold day in January.
Damn, that all makes perfect freaking sense. Tons of questions. Take it away.
Yeah, a question from Josh, also from our Discord. Josh asked, what's an indicator that you've hit your peak at 45 plus? I've spent a lot of time working on speed, and I feel like the gains I've made in recent years are minimal at best. At what point do you say, I can't get any faster than I am now, and refocus?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that an athlete almost ever reaches a distinct peak unless they only have one type of goal. So if this athlete's saying, I want to run a faster mile, and they've dedicated everything they can into that, then maybe we can have a debate about it. But having coached a lot of athletes into their 60s and 70s who are still progressing in different ways, I think if you view it in a well-rounded enough way, there's always room to grow. And especially if you're willing to change the way you do things, invest more in your training and in your development. So for an athlete that's 45, for example, here, what I would say is, hey, how many miles per week are you doing? Because there's a chance you can increase that. And if you can't, for whatever reason, you can definitely increase your cross training volume. The bike and the elliptical are freaking magic. You do that, your aerobic system will build up. Dial back some of that speed, see where that leaves you. Add some strength work, like essentially start turning knobs. Never accept that your peak has passed unless you are just like burnt out and your body hurts and it's just not improving no matter what you do. Because I think all the time athletes write themselves off. I have coached professional athletes that get this, that are 25 and think their peak is long gone. And
Wow.
that's no different often than the athlete that's 45 and thinking it, if
Wow.
you are able to see these trajectories unfold. So obviously there are certain physiological barriers for both men and women. The hormonal changes that can happen in the mid to late 40s do result in a slight shift at one point. But outside of those slight shifts that we need to adapt to slightly, most of the time, athletes always have these incredible horizons in the future. It just kind of requires wading through some crap to get there and some self-doubt, because what worked for you before won't work in the same ways, but other things will work in unique ways that can launch you into the stratosphere. But it requires a lot of belief and a lot of persistence to get there.
You brought up something that I'm a visual person. And when you
Yeah.
mentioned just sort of like twisting the knobs, I imagine we're all kind of in control of this big machine, our bodies and our minds and everything. And we're tweaking knobs to try to find that betterment of our athletic ability. But maybe we're just tweaking the same knob. And there's 10 other knobs over here that we haven't even.
David can't get through this
Knobs.
conversation.
Knobs and
Can't
twisting.
just
Twisting
tweak.
knobs.
And I think it's also the added like
And like,
motion
Yeah.
and
that
like
you're-
this. Like
I'm
twist.
just watching David just like fade.
Melt.
Into,
David, can
It's
you
just
step
that-
out of the 90s for a second?
It's just you're tweaking the one knob too much.
This one though,
Yeah.
like that. I mean, like this one knob. It's a very specific size, and it's just. But then these 20 other like tiny
Yeah,
little
but
knobs that need attention.
I love the way you're pointing that out, though, like in a very serious way, because that is how training theory works. Like, I think sometimes in coaching, and there are coaches out there that view things in such like black and white ways that it's just
Yeah.
not how physiology functions.
Yeah.
Which is why so many different approaches can work too. Because we said 20, there are probably 1,000. Let's say we can measure like 40 of those in a lab, maybe into it another 100. But then that leaves like what, 860 that we're not even able to measure. That we're just like, when I said epigenetics, that is a big whole crock of shit to some people.
Mhm.
And to others, it's the fundamental reason that we adapt the way we do. And the point being, there's tons of things like that. And so, I think that this also gets back to the discussion around talent. A lot of athletes will say, my talent is this thing. They might have gotten a VO2 max test or something. It's like, this is my talent. When in reality, there are thousands of variables. Let's say there's 1,000 variables. I guarantee everybody listening is talented at some of those. Some people listening are talented at 995, and that is a very special Olympian. But the question is, how can you bring out where you are talented? And I think what's so cool in coaching is getting to see people over time that might be like, you know what, I'm just capable of this thing. And then 2,700 days later in their training logs, they're running these insane performances. In fact, there's one guy that I coach who's this delightful person. And I didn't ask him if I could use his name, so I won't. But when he joined like 2,800 days ago, he was desperately trying to break 3 hours in the marathon, had given so much to that, which is really fast, obviously. But like he had dedicated so much of his purpose to that. And you see someone like that that's like, I've done a lot. I'm getting a coach now just because I want to see if I can get under 3. He ran a 2:34 at CIM the other week.
Wow.
So fast. And the point being, like, if you had told him 2,700 days ago that you're going to run a 2:34 in 2022 when, he's in his mid 30s, like, he would have been like, you're lying to me. Stop being a bullshit artist and selling me shit,
Yeah.
In reality, like, that's just the beginning. Like, this guy has a sub 230, and then who knows where it goes from there.
That's amazing. Congratulations to them. That's a dream that, of course, I've had and vocalized to you many times, and it's like, it's never going to happen. Not to bring
That's
this to
not
hockey.
me saying.
No, that's not. No, you would never say that. Not to bring this to hockey, but
we'll bring this to hockey.
can you? Are you with me on this one for a second? We're gonna
I'm
take this to
always
hockey.
down to bring it to hockey.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Go
I
Kraken.
didn't want to start
We
talking.
literally have a coffee mug on our desk that says
Hockey
every night
is
is
hockey,
hockey
night.
night.
I didn't want to get into this, and you go like, "Oh boy, here we go." There is stats in this sport, hockey, which I'm like all in now. Kim
Yeah.
converted me to a hockey fan.
It's what you get when you marry a Canadian.
It's what happens. But I'm all in on the sport because there are so many statistics that are measured with these athletes. But there is a known intangible, and they talk about the intangibles with these athletes quite regularly, actually. Like, there's statisticians that go, yeah, sure, he's got this shot percentage, he's got this save percentage, he's got this hit percentage or whatever. So every player has their statistics. but there's so many intangibles with the player, and that can be a personality that really lifts up the team and gives them this extra motivation. They bring a certain speed to the ice that at certain moments can rejuvenate a team from coming from behind or something like that. So there's all these things that I just really like thinking about that aren't measurable, that every athlete has within them, that maybe they can tap into, that are those extra knobs on the big mechanical control board. It's not a speed. It's not just speed. It could be any number of things. Like all of a sudden, you wake up earlier and now your training's in the morning, and like, holy crap, that just changed your whole dynamic. Stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, anything from durability to metabolic factors to all these
Sure.
different things that we're not measuring all the time. And I love the analogy there to advanced statistics in professional sports. So I'm a huge sports fan, less so of the hockey.
We will
I didn't
forgive
marry-
you.
I married someone from Pennsylvania, not Canada. But in basketball, for example, the most simple advanced statistic is just plus minus, what your team's point like differential is when you're on the floor versus off the floor, and they can control those adjusted plus minus. They do it for your teammates and your opponents and all this. And there are people that across every single year have a great adjusted plus minus, even though they're not like known as stars in the NBA.
Yeah.
And it's the same type of situation. And so, those sports are so heavily quantified that they're able to start seeing things. In running, I think quantification can actually be a detriment because there aren't the statistics in the same manner. So when athletes try to over quantify themselves, they end up thinking that their current trajectory is their future potential. When everything in running, from what I've seen, can work in nonlinear fashions, at least based on the metrics that we can measure. So maybe if you're able to measure everything, you would be able to see it's actually predictable, but in reality, it's not. And that's why belief in investing in consistency and seeing what you're capable of has to come from a place of like faith, because you're never going to actually, like, what you're capable of is going to seem crazy to you.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to just be like, no, impossible.
Yeah.
And that leap is so hard to make. And something that, as a coach, like, you see athletes decide not to make it, which is totally understandable, but it's also kind of heartbreaking, because when someone can do it, you fast forward 2,700 days and it's almost always unthinkable. And it's like the coolest thing, not because of the running trajectory, but because of what that means for someone's entire life. Because if you can do that as a runner in 2,700 days, what can you do with everything else in the world? And I think that's kind of the magic of running.
To bring it to this conversation, during this time of year when we are lacking the motivation, or, I don't want to say everyone lacks motivation during this time, but there's definitely going to be days where maybe I'm going to call it and not do a run today, or my run's going to be shortened or whatever. This is a great chat about how we can believe in those things within ourselves that maybe we don't even know exist yet. And so there is places that we can find hope and find belief in our athletic ability on the days, weeks, months where it feels like we've lost it. So I'm listening to everything you're saying, David, and I'm freaking ready to go. Like, I can't wait for today's run.
I mean, to use that number, it's 2,700 bricks away, right? And there's no way around that. And that's daunting as hell, which is why you can't ever conceive of anything all at once and want to do it necessarily. If you have any clue, think about anything in your life that you've ever accomplished and think back to the beginning. Most of the time, if I think about that path again, I just get so sleepy. And I'm like, oh. So the point is, like, how can each one of those be fun? Because you're going to have to stack them all up no matter what, if you can. And so that's why each little one, like, I'm not thinking about, I try not to ground athletes in, hey, this is what you're capable of 2,700 days from now, even though I do tell them, I'm very clear with them usually. It's more about, hey, how can we make this next one like multicolored with glitter? Because that's going to be the one that gets us to 2,700 days in this zoomed out perspective. And I mean, that's the magic of coaching. And it's something that I wish everyone was able to experience, not for running's sake, but for understanding how life trajectories unfold. Because it almost always in the moment looks like nothing. And it's just kind of meaningless and often boring or whatever. And it leads to this beautiful picture long-term. But if you get bogged down in those moments, like, you just never see it and you just kind of stay where you are, which is fine. Where you are can be amazing. But I think a lot of life's beauty is found in kind of the striving for striving's sake.
Brilliant. Great question. Good find on that one.
Yeah.
Let's keep it going.
Yeah, this question is from JShav36, and they ask, I run 5 days a week. When trying to increase weekly volume, should I, 1, spread the added distance over the 5 days equally, 2, add the increase to my long run, or 3, add a 6th day?
Amazing question. So if this athlete isn't like heavily injury dependent, I would say add a 6th day. So the outsized gains that some athletes get from 6 days can be pretty great, and it's much better to test it out, see if that's you, before being like, I'm just a 5-day athlete, which is fine. And a lot of athletes are 5 days, including some professional athletes we coach. But at least try to get a cross training day on that 6th day. That constant reinforcement does seem to help, maybe for some of the reasons we already discussed. And then once you've plateaued at that volume, I would start oscillating the stresses a lot more, because the more your body, if you just do the same thing every day, obviously will start to adapt to that, and you can get some changes, but you'll start to find a level. So if you can oscillate both within a week and then across weeks, that's how you start to really see these adaptation processes take hold. So, I think, like, you might have heard in CrossFit or something, they sometimes call it muscle confusion, which is such a misnomer about how the body actually adapts, but it's the same principle, but in a more scientific way, where essentially you're giving the body a stimulus that's a little bit higher stress and then backing off the stress so that it can adapt to that. And so what that looks like in practice usually is, on one of those days each week, introduce some intensity, anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes of faster running mixed up as intervals usually. On one of those days, have it be a little bit longer, where you're stressing your aerobic system, and then have the other days be supportive, and then add strides on top of that. And then every once in a while, just totally mix it up and do something random, totally different on your body, based on training theory. So essentially, increase the volume via that 6th day, then oscillate the stresses within each week.
Awesome. We are kind of approaching the end of our show, so I want to make sure that we get as many questions as we can. So maybe we can do like a rapid fire series. Normally we reserve that for the after show, but our show now is GRLive with the GR Crew. So let's just rip through.
Yeah, Allison in the chat says, David, what are your thoughts on the latest article in Trail Runner about elliptical cross training can replace running and enhance running fitness?
The question is, did I write that? I might have. I wrote an article about ellipticals. Yeah, so elliptical is a magical machine. I think that one of the most interesting things that's happened in running training theory recently, is some athletes at the highest of levels. So Natasha Wodak, Canadian Olympian, who just set the Canadian record in the marathon at age 40 or 42, 40, I think. Parker Valby, who just finished second at NCAAs in cross country and won the 5K back in the spring. They all use the elliptical heavily. In fact, Parker Valby, this athlete who's one of the best runners in the whole country, trains 20 to 25 miles with running per week, and the rest is done on the elliptical. Not saying that's for everybody, but if you're out there, I think it's a great device to have in your home if you can. But if not, it's a great way to supplement your training if you're injury prone, or just like for whatever reason it's easier. I don't think it's ever a replacement. I mean, Parker Valby and Natasha Wodak are extreme talents who would be fast almost no matter what they did. But their example shows that it can develop the aerobic system in a way that is very similar to running. And so I think they are really good. But if you're interested in it, make sure you check out the article I wrote on the elliptical, which has a video, because I think the form that most people use on the elliptical is not conducive to running, like the kind of just the one you see in the gym of like this. Right. There's a very specific way that a lot of runners use it, and I try to demonstrate it in that article.
I will say that Allison did jump back into the chat and said, "Oh my God, you did write that! Ha ha ha! I am a loser."
No, Allison, you're amazing, and I do that all the time to myself. I've written so many articles. I almost feel like it's like The Simpsons, where they say the Simpsons have done everything. That often I'll have an idea for an article. I'll start writing a couple paragraphs, and then I'll Google something. It'll pop up an article, and I'll be like, "Shit, I wrote about this in 2015. What am I doing?
I've already done this."
Yeah.
Question from Brian. Brian says, hi, David. For strength training, for strength workouts in the gym with weights, what are the benefits to before versus after a run?
Yeah, so definitely don't want to run with your body loaded separately in a non like activation manner, because of injury rates and also neuromuscular patterns of development. So like, I think any argument that says that is like missing the forest through the trees, because the injury risk just in general of loading your body in a differential fashion before you go run in a way that breaks you down at all is not good. So breakdown is kind of the proxy variable here to look at. If your strength training is essentially just activation, like anything from push-ups to some lunges to, band work, that sort of thing, that's fine to do before you run. It might get you ready, make you feel good. It might actually get the muscles more prepared to perform. If you do the type of strength training that introduces any sort of hypertrophy or any sort of breakdown at all, don't mess with that till after the run. And then after the run's a great way to do it. And we theorize that there might actually be added benefits to that. So we frame a lot of the strength our athletes do around mountain legs and speed legs. So focusing on these certain types of loading patterns, we always tell athletes to do it as quickly as they can after the runs, if it's possible. It can just be later in the day. But the reason is the single leg step ups that a lot of athletes do, including like all over the world now. If you do them right after the run, it is a huge fatigue resistant stress in a way that's pretty unique to describe. And what we've seen over time is if you can isolate some variables, we'll see that correlate with athletes performing much better at the end of races. Not saying that's exactly why, we're just saying that there's a correlation amongst our data set. So yeah, loading the body right after you run might have some outsized benefits to your running performance.
Fantastic. Yeah, I need to start doing more mountain legs. I keep talking about it and wanting to incorporate it. I want to start doing more because it destroys your legs, like in a good way. Feels
so
great.
Right after you run, you can drop everything else except the single leg step ups if you have to, and just do it right then. Like view it as a part of your run. Like I notice with myself too, I feel that way about strength. Like I just don't necessarily want to do it. And over time, I've been like, I can just go do my 50 single leg step ups on both legs right after. And even if I don't do anything else ever, that'll be enough. And that's kind of what we encourage the most. And so I've seen really, just fascinating things on what that can do to an athlete over time.
Yeah. Maybe one last question.
Yeah, last question. This is from the Discord server, and it's from Yasa. Yasa says, "Congrats on the family edition. In what ways has it altered your views on running as an athlete and as a coach of other runners with kids?"
Amazing question. I don't really think it has altered anything for me thus far. If anything, it just underscores the need for everything to be more playful, right? Like, seeing this little kid he's 7 weeks tomorrow. You go through the world. He's kind of a blank slate right now. Kind of just sits there. He's smiling now, which is so cool. You just really are drawn back to the idea that like there is this beauty in the world all the time for us to find, right? That's what he's seeing with his eyes. Like he's not experiencing anxiety about anything or thinking about these big narratives. And for me, it's really drawn home that like when I do get out to exercise or do anything, make it silly, make it fun. Like that's the type of father I want to be. It's the type of world I want to model for him, where the entirety of what we do in our days can just be joyous. Because like, yeah, there's a lot of big picture stuff, but like he doesn't know about climate change. He doesn't know about politics. He doesn't know about any of that. Like obviously that shit is incredibly important. But at the core, like we're given a certain amount of time here on Earth and let's make it as fun as we possibly can. So, obviously there's brain chemistry constraints on that for a lot of people. But I think often we get so caught up in bigger narratives. What's this kid going to grow up to be? How can I be the perfect father? Is he getting the right amount of breast milk? How is he sleeping? All this stuff that we do with ourselves too. It's like, how am I changing the world? Am I, doing enough? Am I responding to the emails in the way I need to respond to them? What does that person think of me? And I think all of it, looking at his 7-year-old or 7-week-old, beautiful, perfect soul, I'm like, oh shit, none of that matters. That's all stuff we're grafting onto existence. And so with athletics specifically, it's like I've really come home to being like, wow, what a chance to live the principles I want to pass on. And if I can do that, even on the hard days, especially on the hard days, maybe it'll make me like a 1% better father. Not because I teach him to become a champion kid, because I don't give a shit. But because I teach him to look at the world and see just like a little bit more of a chance for beauty in whatever he decides to do with his life.
That's awesome, David. Huge congratulations to becoming a dad. I know it's a huge, amazing gift. We absolutely love you too. Heather in the chat says, I smile all the time. I love smiling. It's my favorite. Or is it gas? So
Yeah.
it's brilliant.
That's perfect. I think it's actually interesting. So we posted these videos of him rolling over when he was like 2 weeks old. The number of people that reached out and said, "Oh yeah, they'll do that by accident sometimes," and then we just like posted 25 more videos of it at times, like just like a collage of it, and we're like, "Fuck you, this kid is magical." So like every parent thinks that about their kid. But,
Everything, right? Every little thing.
But I mean, I guess that's the point. Is like, why does that have to be? Why does like the thing that's magical have to be like your child or whatever? Like that's like what I hope to take away from parenting and bring to him too. It's like, as much as you can, like find those things that let you be the silly little baby. Because that's kind of what we all are, or all can be. So that's why I love Ginger Runner. It's like, you guys bring that to your 187,000 subscribers. Like, yes, there's very serious things, and we sit down with those and we, cry together and all that. But then also we get silly as fuck about Chris Evans' dong. And
who brought up his dong? What's that?
Who didn't?
I guess we all did.
We all did.
It's implied.
Definitely.
It's America. But like, that's like what's so cool. And that's why running's so cool, is because running, it's very serious at times, and it's great to take it seriously, but is also the silliest way to spend your day.
Yeah.
And I find so much joy in that. And like, I love being a runner during fatherhood. Obviously there's not as much time, but I love it even more because it's like, I get to bring whatever energy I'm able to cultivate in the world back to him. So yeah, I mean, I want to also validate everyone out there that feels like sad, because especially at Christmas, like, it is okay to cry on Christmas Day. Like, all of what I'm saying is not saying that you need to be happy or you need to feel silly. It's saying that you need to feel. And so whether that's crying or laughing or whatever, listening to country music on a run, great. You know what else is great on a run? Crying your eyes out about a breakup. Like, it also can be the most memorable run you've ever had. That this way, running is an excuse to feel these things and to embody a little bit of like this nature, this like 7-week-old, just visceral, life is real nature that I think sometimes when we get inside our own heads, it can be so much more difficult to. And I struggle with it all the time. So yeah, that's basically my message. Cry on Christmas, but if you can, also like try to do the silliest shit you've ever seen and laugh at things that you shouldn't laugh at, and bring that energy to people that are around you. And most of all, bring that energy into 2023, because life gets a little bit richer if you're able to like think about Chris Evans' dong.
Whipped cream bikinis for everyone.
I love that it's full circle. I love that we're able to do a perfect show by bringing it full circle right on back to the dog.
To the knobs.
David, we just absolutely appreciate your time and being able to join us and stuff like that. I want to give you, of course, the opportunity to let people know where they can listen to the podcast, find you online, do all that stuff. So, David, take it away.
Some Work All Play podcast. We have interviewed Alex Honnold, Courtney DeWalter, Killeen Jornet, all those people, but most of all, it's just a place where we get to have fun together and talk about all these different things. So subscribe if you can, or quick follow, whatever, the Some Work All Play podcast. If you never listen, it's weird. You might like it, you might not. So worth a try. Otherwise, make sure that you just support Ethan and Kim everywhere. They are the best. They lift up this community so much, and I love them very much.
We love you too, David. And if you like this podcast, you will love Some Work All Play. So I cannot recommend it enough. And the Alex Honnold episode alone is worth your listening ears. It's worth your ears as time. Then ears have a finite amount of time.
Ears?
Get out of here.
They're corn. They're corn.
They're corn candles. So we just gave it away. So, if you were thinking about joining the GR crew, to find out what those were, you don't have to anymore. Thank you, David. We appreciate you.
Yeah, well, and everyone listening, love you all. Have the best Christmas and best holidays. And it's just an honor to be a part of this.
We appreciate that. And ask Coach Roche. That's actually, I didn't mention this at the top of the show. This is our last Ginger Runner Live of the year.
Yes.
We wanted to have David on specifically for that reason, because he's been such a great guest throughout this year. And doing these Ask Coach Roche episodes are so beneficial for so many people. So this is our last Ginger Runner Live episode. Next week, Tuesday
Yep.
is our Gingermas Awards show, because this weekend is Gingermas. If you haven't registered, please go do so, gingermas.com. It's our way of giving back. It's a free run scavenger hunt. If you're looking to do something fun this weekend, you need to get out of your head or get outside and do something fun. We host this free virtual event
It's
that you
free.
get to
It's
participate.
for fun. We have tons of brands and tons of
So
folks chipping in for
many
prizes. Yeah, it's always a fun weekend
And so Tuesday will be our award show.
with.
Gary Claus, aka Gary Robbins, will be joining us on the show. And that will be our final show of the year. It's going to be a lot of fun. So please join us. Thank you to our guest, David. Do we have a crew member of the week?
Yes.
Let's do it. Every week, we like to recognize members of the community who go above and beyond. We call them our GR crew members of the week. Kim, who's this week's GR crew member?
This week's GR crew member of the week is the collective crew. I want to close out the year by celebrating everyone, whether or not you are here for 1 month or if you've been with us for years and years and years. We just appreciate you all so much. You guys bring so much to us, and you guys bring so much to everyone else within the community, showing up for each other all the time, whether that's traveling physically or just showing up for each other in Discord or on Facebook. We just appreciate you all.
I can't recommend belonging to a community enough. And the fact that the GR crew has established themselves as this incredibly supportive community, well beyond Kim and myself. Like, we see these community members support one another in their daily lives, their racing lives, their training lives, just so much support. It is the coolest, most beautiful thing. I know I mention it on every review that I post, and every film and everything. There's some link to Patreon, but I cannot recommend just belonging to an amazing community of fellow runners and how much that means. It also supports everything that we do, and we're very appreciative of that.
Yeah.
But if you just want to be a part of like cool people, you had a guest on the show today who has a community known as Some Work All Play that is a beautiful community to belong to. You've got the GR crew. You've got so many places that you can belong. And we appreciate everyone who has decided to belong to today's GR crew. Thanks so much. That's going to wrap up today's episode. Thanks to our guest. Go follow him. All that good stuff. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and party the hardest. We'll see you guys next week for Gingermas, or next year for GRLive. I was going to say next year, but I was like, well, technically next week.
Yeah.
We appreciate you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great rest of your evening.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Ginger Rock.